She was 20 years old and had nowhere to go. Not in the way people say it when they mean they don't know what to do next. She meant it in the plainest, most literal sense. No address. No lease. No family member whose couch she hadn't already worn out her welcome on. She had a canvas backpack, a pair of boots with a cracked sole, and $15 folded into the lining of her jacket. She had been sleeping in her car for 6 weeks until the car died on a highway outside of Albuquerque, and she left it there on the shoulder with the keys still in it, because what else do you do with a dead thing that belongs to you? Her name was Nora Walsh. She was born in a small town in eastern Kentucky, the kind of place where the mountains press so close to the roads that in winter the sun only touches the valley floor for a few hours a day. Her father had worked in the mines until the mine closed. Her mother had worked at a diner until the diner closed. Her parents were not bad people. They were tired people, which is a different thing, though from the inside it can feel the same. By the time Nora was 18, there was nothing left in that valley that she could build a life on, and she left the way young people leave places like that. Quietly, with a bag and a bus ticket, and the guilty relief of someone escaping something that has not yet fully caught fire. She spent 2 years moving. She waitressed in Nashville. She worked the front desk at a motel in Amarillo. She picked up shifts at a feed store in Tucson where the owner paid her in cash and let her sleep in the back room on a cot between the bags of horse supplement and the boxes of fly spray. She wasn't running from anything specific. She was just a person who had not yet found the place where she was supposed to stop. Some people know that place early. They grow up in it, or they recognize it the first time they see it, like a face they have seen before in a dream. Nora had not found it yet. But she kept moving, because moving felt more honest than stopping somewhere that wasn't right. The property listing was on a sheet of paper tacked to a bulletin board inside a county courthouse in central New Mexico, where Nora had gone to use the restroom and fill her water bottle from the tap. She almost didn't read it. She was tired and her boots were wet from walking in the morning dew, and she was thinking about whether the gas station down the road would let her sit inside for an hour without buying anything. But she read it. County surplus AU Sictian. Minimum BID $10. Parcel 88A, approximately 1.1 acres, unincorporated land, Torrance County. One structure, stone and adobe dwelling, estimated 900 square feet, built circa 1920. Last inhabited, approximately 1961. No road access. No utilities. Owner of record, estate of Dr. Edmund Hale, deceased 1962. No heirs of record. She stood in the courthouse hallway and read it 3 times. $10. She had $15. Before we go further, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Nora Walsh had not thought much about archaeology. She had not thought much about the American Southwest, or about abandoned properties, or about what a person might leave behind in a stone house in the middle of the desert when they died without heirs and without anyone to come looking for their things. But she had thought almost every day since she was old enough to think about such things, about what it felt like to belong somewhere, to have a place that was hers, not borrowed, not temporary, not contingent on her performance or her rent check or someone else's patience. Hers. She found the county clerk's office at the end of the hall. She paid $10 in cash across a laminate counter to a man who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and looked at her the way people look at someone doing something that doesn't quite make sense but also isn't any of their business. He stamped a form. He handed her a copy. She walked out of the courthouse with $5 left and a piece of paper that said she owned 1.1 acres of land in Torrance County, New Mexico. The walk to the property took most of a day. There was no road. The listing had been clear about that. But the county clerk had drawn her a rough map on the back of an envelope, a dotted line from a cattle gate off the highway, across a dry wash up a ridge of pinon and juniper, and down into a shallow valley on the other side. The land was high desert, the kind of landscape that looks empty from a distance and reveals itself slowly as you walk into it. Okra and rust, pale green sage, the smell of juniper resin in the warm afternoon air, clouds building over the mountains to the west, white at the top and dark at the base. She reached the valley just before sunset. The house sat at the far end of it against the base of a low mesa. It was small and square, built from dark adobe brick with a flat roof and a narrow covered porch running along the south face. A wooden door, weathered to gray. 2 small windows, their glass intact but filmed with years of dust. A stone chimney on the east wall. The whole structure had settled slightly into the earth over the decades, the way old buildings do. Not collapsed, not ruined, just gradually becoming part of the ground it stood on. Behind the house, almost hidden by a stand of juniper, was a second structure, lower, narrower. More stone than adobe. No windows. A wooden door with a hasp latch and a padlock that had been locked for so long the mechanism had rusted into a single piece of frozen metal. Nora stood at the edge of the valley and looked at the house and the outbuilding and the mesa behind them turning dark red in the last of the sun. This was hers. She spent the first night in the house. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was dry and still, carrying the faint smell of old paper and the mineral dust of adobe. There was furniture still inside. A heavy wooden table, 2 chairs, a metal cot frame against the back wall, a bookshelf along one side still holding a row of books. Everything filmed with the same fine grayish dust that covered the windows. A kerosene lantern on the table with a few inches of fuel still in the reservoir, which Nora lit with a match from her jacket pocket and set in the center of the table. The books on the shelf were technical. Field journals. Geological surveys. A volume called Stratigraphy of the Ancestral Puebloan Southwest, its spine cracked with use. Several notebooks with marbled covers, the kind that field researchers use, their pages swollen with humidity from years long past. On the table, weighted down by a smooth river stone, was a folded map. Nora looked at it for a long moment before she picked it up. It was a topographic map of the region, hand-annotated in pencil, trail routes marked in red, elevations noted in small, precise numbers. And in the northeastern quadrant of the map, in an area of mesa and canyon country that Nora did not recognize from the drive-in, a circle drawn in red ink. Inside the circle, 2 words in small, careful handwriting, "Still here." She didn't know what it meant. She set the map back on the table and went to sleep on the floor in her sleeping bag, listening to the desert night outside. The wind through the junipers. A coyote calling somewhere to the north, the profound silence of a place that had not heard a human voice in a very long time. In the morning, she started with the outbuilding. The padlock was frozen solid, but the hasp it was attached to had pulled slightly free from the wood over the decades, and with a flat stone and steady pressure she was able to work the screws loose until the entire latch mechanism came away from the door. She set it on the ground carefully. She pushed the door open. Inside was a single room, smaller than she had expected. Stone floor, stone walls, a low ceiling of rough-cut timber, no windows, no furniture except for a wooden workbench along the back wall, and beneath the bench, a row of metal storage cases of the kind used by field researchers to protect equipment and specimens. Green painted steel with latching handles. Government issue. She would later learn. The kind of cases the National Park Service and the Bureau of Indian Affairs used in the 1940s and 1950s to transport sensitive materials from field sites. There were 6 of them. If you're enjoying this story, take a second and subscribe. It helps us keep making stories like this one. She opened the first case. Inside, wrapped in waxed canvas, were photographs. Black and white, 8 by 10 inches, printed on heavy paper stock. She lifted the top one and carried it to the doorway where the morning light was coming in strong and clear. It showed a canyon wall. Stone striated ancient. And on the stone, carved or painted in pigment that had survived for what looked like centuries. Symbols. She did not recognize them. Not petroglyphs in the style she had seen in photographs of the region. Not anything she could name. A row of interlocking shapes repeating. Below them, what looked like a map. Carved lines that suggested waterways, elevations, distances. And at the center of the carved map, a single shape that appeared again and again throughout the panel. A circle with a line through it, like a symbol for something, like a signature. She went through all the photographs in the first case. There were 41 of them, all from the same canyon, the same wall. Different sections, different angles. Someone had photographed the entire panel systematically, the way you document something you are afraid of losing. She opened the second case. Inside was a leather document folder with a brass closure clasp. She opened it. The papers inside were typed on government letterhead. Bureau of Land Management, Department of the Interior, dated 1943. The heading read, RE, Site 7 Delta, Torrance County Survey, restricted, not for distribution. She started reading. The document was a memo. It referenced a field survey conducted by a contracted archaeologist. Dr. Edmund Hale, the same name on the property deed. In the summer of 1942, the survey had been commissioned as part of a broader wartime resource assessment of federal lands in the Southwest. The memo summarized Dr. Hale's findings. She read slowly. The language was bureaucratic, flat, careful. But what it said was not flat at all. Dr. Hale had found something. Site in the canyon country northeast of the property. The area circled on the map in the house, the area marked still here. He had documented a carved wall panel of unknown origin, and adjacent to it, the remains of a structural complex, not ancestral Puebloan, not consistent with any known prehistoric culture of the region. The stonework was different. The layout was different. The carved symbols did not match any catalog system of petroglyphs in the Southwest, or, as Hale noted in one careful sentence at the bottom of a page, anywhere else in the existing literature. The memo then described the government's response. The site was to be classified, the survey documentation, all photographs, field notes, maps, was to be recalled and secured. Dr. Hale was to be informed that his contract had concluded and that publication of his findings would require departmental approval, which would not be forthcoming. The memo was signed by a senior official whose name Nora did not recognize. Below the signature, a handwritten addition in different ink and handwriting she was beginning to recognize from the map in the house. The handwriting said, "They took the originals. These are my copies. If you find this, the site is still there. I never went back. I should have gone back." Nora sat down on the stone floor of the outbuilding with the document in her hands and the morning light coming through the open door and the silence of the desert all around her. She opened the third case. More photographs, but different. Site photographs. The ruins of structures. Stone walls standing 2 or 3 courses high, the desert reclaiming them. An entrance to what might have been a subterranean chamber, partially collapsed. Carved stone lintels with the same repeating symbol. Circle with a line. The fourth case held field notes. Notebooks. The same marbled cover notebooks she had seen on the shelf in the house. Filled in the same small, precise handwriting. Page after page of observation, measurement, description. Hale had been methodical. He had been thorough. He had been, she could tell from the writing, very excited, and trying not to show it. On the last page of the last notebook, he had written, "I do not know who built this place. I do not know when. I do not know why it was here and nowhere else. I know only that it should not exist according to everything I was trained to believe about this region. And I know that whoever built it knew something about this land that we have not yet learned to see." Below that, one final line. The answer is in the wall. The wall is still there. The fifth case held more government documents. Letters between officials. References to Dr. Hale's contract termination. One letter from 1944 discussed the possibility of the site being remediated, a word that in context seemed to mean destroyed. But a subsequent letter noted that the remoteness of the location made remediation logistically impractical, and that classification of the documentation would be sufficient to ensure the site remained unknown. They had decided it was easier to bury the knowledge than to bury the site. The sixth case was the lightest. Inside was a single envelope sealed with wax, Nora's name written on the outside. She stared at it for a long moment. Her name, her full name, Nora Walsh, written in Edmund Hale's handwriting on an envelope that had been sitting in this outbuilding for decades. Her hands were not quite steady when she broke the wax seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. If you're still with us, take a moment and subscribe. What you're about to read is what changed everything. It said, "Miss Walsh, you don't know me. I knew your grandmother. Eleanor Walsh, née Marsh, who grew up in Harlan County, Kentucky, and who in the summer of 1941 worked as a transcriptionist at the Bureau of Land Management Regional Office in Albuquerque, where she typed 3 of the memos you will find in this collection before she was reassigned to another department without explanation. Your grandmother knew what she had typed. She never spoke of it. But she kept a copy of one document, and she sent it to me. And that act of quiet courage was the reason I made my own copies before they took everything else. I do not know if you will ever find this place. I do not know how the world will arrange itself to bring you here, or if it will. But I have left this property to no one specific for a reason. It will go to whoever comes. And I believe, in the way that old men believe things they cannot fully explain, that the person who comes will be connected to this in some way they don't yet understand. The site is real. The wall is real. I was not wrong about what I found. I was only wrong to stop. Don't stop. Edmund Hale, October 1961. Nora read the letter 4 times. Her grandmother, Eleanor Walsh, a woman who had died before Nora was born, who existed in Nora's life only as a face in a photograph her mother kept on the dresser. A young woman in a cotton dress standing in front of a building that Nora had never known the name of. She folded the letter and held it in both hands and sat in the stone outbuilding in the New Mexico desert and tried to understand what it meant to be connected to a place you had never been, through a woman you had never met, by way of a document typed 70 years ago in an office in Albuquerque. She didn't fully understand it, but she felt it, the way you feel a key turn in a lock that you didn't know was there. She spent the following weeks making the house livable. She walked to the highway and hitched into the nearest town, a small place with a hardware store and a diner and not much else, and bought what she could afford with her remaining money. She carried everything back on her shoulders over the ridge and down into the valley. She fixed the roof where a section of adobe had cracked. She cleaned the windows. She repaired the door frame. She slept on the cot frame with her sleeping bag and woke before dawn every morning to watch the mesa behind the house turn from gray to pink to red as the sun came up over the desert. She read everything in the 6 cases. She read it twice. She read the field notes 3 times, following Hale's measurements and directions, trying to understand exactly where the site was in the canyon country to the northeast, the circle on the map, still here. She found a woman in town, a retired professor of anthropology from the University of New Mexico, who had come to the desert 20 years ago and never left, the way some people do. Her name was Dolores. She drove a truck the color of old rust and kept 3 dogs that rode in the bed everywhere she went. Nora showed her the photographs. Dolores looked at them for a long time without speaking. Then she looked at Nora. Then she looked at the photographs again. "Where did you get these?" "From the property I bought. They belong to a man named Edmund Hale." "I know who Edmund Hale was," Dolores said. "He published one paper in 1947. The field dismissed it. He died obscure." "Where is the site?" "I don't know exactly. I'm still working it out from his notes." Dolores set the photographs down carefully. "If these are real, and they look real, then what Hale found does not fit any known cultural sequence in this region, which means either he made a serious error or the cultural sequence is wrong." She paused. "How long have you had this?" 3 weeks. "You need to be careful who else you show these to. Not because the information is dangerous, but because information that challenges established frameworks tends to disappear before it can be examined. Hale knew that. It sounds like he knew it very well." Nora thought about the memo, remediation, classification. "The site remains unknown." "It stayed unknown for 80 years, Nora said. "Yes," Dolores said. "It did." She went back with a map and 3 days of supplies. She found the canyon on the 2nd day, following Hale's directions through terrain that had not changed in 80 years. The same ridgelines, the same dry wash, the same stand of cottonwood marking the canyon entrance that he had noted in the field journal. The wall was there. She stood in front of it for a long time. It was exactly as the photographs had shown it. The striated stone, the carved panel, the repeating symbols, the circle with the line through it, the carved map. All of it still there, exactly as Hale had left it in 1942, exactly as it had been left by whoever had made it in a time before anyone had thought to look. She did not touch it. She took photographs. She made notes. She measured. She was careful and methodical the way Hale had been careful and methodical, because some things deserve that kind of attention. She did not know who had built this place. She did not know when or why or what had happened to them. Those questions were too large for one person standing alone in a canyon with a camera and a notebook. Those questions would take years and other people and resources she did not yet have. But the wall was there. The site was there. The symbols were there, carved into stone that had been waiting for 80 years for someone to come back and see them. Hale had been right. On the last day before she walked back out of the canyon, she sat down against the base of the carved wall and read the letter again. The one addressed to her, the one that should not have known her name. She thought about her grandmother, Eleanor Walsh, a young woman in an office in Albuquerque in 1941, typing words she understood and choosing quietly and without fanfare to make a copy, not a dramatic act, not heroism. Just a small decision to not let something disappear entirely into official silence. She thought about Hale, who had found something extraordinary and been told to forget it, and who had instead spent the rest of his life keeping copies in a stone outbuilding in the desert, waiting for someone who would come when he could not. She thought about the valley and the house and the 6 green metal cases and the map with the circle and the 2 words, "Still here." She folded the letter and put it in her jacket pocket. Then she stood up and looked at the wall one more time. She didn't know what came next. She knew there were people to contact, institutions to navigate, a long and uncertain process ahead of making something like this known in a way that couldn't be dismissed or buried again. She knew it would not be simple. She knew that some things, once found, cannot be unfound, and that this is both a gift and a weight. But she knew something else, too. She had walked into a desert with $15 and a cracked boot and no address and no plan. She had bought a piece of land for $10. She had opened 6 metal cases and read the words of a man who had trusted a place to bring the right person, and a woman who had trusted a small act of courage to reach someone she would never meet. And the place had brought her. That's the thing about the things that wait for us. They don't announce themselves. They don't appear on maps that everyone can read. They sit in stone outbuildings in desert valleys behind padlocked doors, inside green metal cases on government-issue shelves, waiting for the person who is pulled there by something they cannot explain and cannot resist. Some things are buried because someone is afraid of them. Some things are buried because there is no one left to carry them. And some things, the rarest kind, are buried by someone who believed, without proof, that the right person would eventually come. That faith is its own kind of map. It doesn't show you the road. It just marks the place. And if you are paying attention, if you have been moving in the right direction without knowing why, you find it. Nora Walsh was 20 years old and homeless. She had $10 and she spent it on a piece of desert and a locked door and 6 cases full of everything a careful man had refused to let disappear. It was the best $10 she ever spent. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell us in the comments. Have you ever found something that felt like it had been waiting for you specifically? We'd love to hear your story. See you in the next one.